So in this video we are going to read the book by M.K. Pandey on logical reasoning, which is important for every exam like CLAT, AILET or any other banking exam, etc. So first we are going to read through the book and then I am going to explain you through my notes. So it says like this chapter is a study of argumentation. Argumentation is fundamental to all logic. In logic, we advocate a certain point of view with the help of some evidences and certain assumptions. The whole thing may be called arguing or simply argumentation. As you will see, arguments are the backbone of analytical reasoning and is very important to understand the way they work. Almost all possible type of questions are in some way related to argumentation. What is the inference of the argumentation? What is the assumption of the argument? What are the strengthening points of the argument? Whether this argument is weak or strong, etc. Hence, I would advise you to go through this chapter very carefully before you move on the deeper aspects of reasoning. So, I have concluded the first passage in 4 points, and it says like when a logic with a certain point of view and some evidences and certain assumption is called an argumentation. So in analytical reasoning and logic reasoning, it is very important to note that we have a certain point of view which we think will be correct on the basis of logic, and evidences here means that you have some lines provided in the passage that indicate that this option will be correct, and obviously the assumption is known as argumentation. So fundamental to all in logic means it is the most essential to logic. Argumentation is most essential to logic and it is backbone of analytical reasoning, and inference, assumption, strengthening point are also considered under it. So let us read further. What is an argument? An argument is a sequence of two or more phrases, clauses, sentences or statements which include a claim or conclusion. This conclusion is arrived with the help of one or more than one statement, which may be called premise or proposition. In addition, the argument also takes the help of some hidden premises, which may be called assumptions. The following two examples will illustrate the concept. The ground was slippery, it must have been raining. In the foregoing example, the argument proposes a conclusion that it must have been raining. The conclusion is arrived with the help of supporting evidence or premise that the ground was slippery. The conclusion and the premise are connected by the assumption, which is not explicitly stated, it is hidden, that the ground becomes slippery only when it rains. Thus a careful postmortem leads to following breakup of its constituent parts. Premise, the ground was slippery. Assumption, hidden premise, the ground becomes slippery only when it rains. Conclusion, it must have rained. The following example brings us the basic characteristics of argumentation. It also leaves some doubts. For example, is the number of premise necessarily 1? Is the assumption always present? The answer is to the both questions is no. In an argument, the number of premises can be more than one, as explained in example 2. Further, it is not necessary that every argument have an assumption. Remember, an assumption is a hidden premise, a missing link in the chain of logic, and if an argument is complete in itself. So this was it for this page. Now let us move ahead to the explanation. So argument is further divided into claim and conclusion. As we read it, we got to know that. Okay. So one or more than one statement results into a premise and supporting evidence. So now let us discuss what is claim. So claim is nothing but the two random statements provided in the passage. Okay. And they result into a premise. Okay. And the statements, so then the statements are also known as supporting evidence. Argument takes help of some hidden premise called assumption, and assumptions are mostly hidden. Okay, so when the author is talking about something, he has already something in his mind when he is talking about something, so that is also known as assumption of the author. Okay, now let us consider the example 1. The ground was slippery, it must have been raining. So the first part, the ground was slippery, is the premise, basically the statement provided to you, and the second one is conclusion. It must have been raining. So conclusion has been arrived over here, and now assumption. So in the example one, what is the assumption? So the ground becomes slippery only when it rains. So this is basically the logic, that is कि ground will only become slippery when it rains. It is a very normal thing to understand also. Now let us move further. Assumption is the missing link in the chain of logic. Okay, so now you got to know that the ground was slippery, it must have been raining. Okay, now when you have provided only with this statement the ground was slippery, you got to know by your logic the missing chain behind with it, कि the only way that ground becomes slippery, that it had been rained. And the thing that came into your mind just now is that what the assumption is all about. So the ground only becomes slippery. The ground becomes slippery only when it rains. Now let us move ahead. Assumption can be there or cannot be there if the argument is complete in itself. If the argument is complete in itself, there is no need of assumption. Okay, so when the assumption is placed in the sentence, okay, then there is no assumption needed extra or something like that. Okay, the ground was slippery, the ground cannot have become slippery without rains, so it must have rained. So from this we got to know assumption was already in part of the example or a sentence or the full structure of the paragraph. Okay, as to find it. So the trick comes from here only. Whenever you want to find the assumption, try to place it in the sentence and see if it makes any sense. So that is it for today, and if you want more such videos, you have to comment down, you have to leave a like, and then only we'll move ahead. I hope you found this video helpful. We'll upload more such videos in future.